Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. We've recently launched our Patreon page, which can be found at cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon. If you aren't familiar with Patreon, it's an easy way for those who are interested in this show to help out by simply pledging a small amount each month in sponsorship. Now that could be as little as $5 a month, which is about £3.80, or as much as you like. You will enable us to dedicate more time creating more content to help you, including videos, more blog posts, and even more shows. So if you can, head over to cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon and get involved. In this episode, we talked to Brandon Lyons about Vue.js, another front-end technology for JavaScript. Where will it end? Do we really need another framework? Anyway, Brandon is a full-stack web developer with a passion for front-end development, specifically Vue.js. He currently works at Mcity, an automated vehicle proving ground located at the University of Michigan. Brandon first got into web development in high school by making basic HTML websites and has been working for the University of Michigan, doing web development for a little over a year now. The first time Brandon used Vue was while building an account and data management single-page application for the university's hospital. Since then, he's grown to appreciate Vue even more and become fully immersed in its ecosystem. On a daily basis, Brandon uses Vue.js and Python to build a suite of web apps for Mcity, including account management, project tracking, single-page applications, and his personal favourite, a front-end interface for Mcity's traffic control API, which sounds really scary. Really scary. And anyway, welcome to The Cynical Developer, Brandon.
Hi, it's great to be on here. I've been listening for a while, and it's great to finally have a chance to give back.
Yeah, it's awesome to get people on to talk about stuff, and it's even better when you find out that they actually listen to the show as well. So it's a bit of full circle. So thank you for coming on and talking to us about yet another JavaScript framework, because there are a lot of them out there. There really are, and it's getting very confusing as to which one you should pick for what job.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them. I mean, I guess I got lucky. I picked Vue and kind of dove right in, and then realized I really liked the framework. I like the whole ecosystem around it, so I think I made a good bet, but we'll see how it pays off.
Yeah, because it was very much a two-horse race with Angular and React for a long time. And Vue.js seems to have sort of snuck in on the outside and sort of taken out some of the competitors. And I think it's the cool new framework to use.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of hearing, and it's really cool to hear a lot of developers going, "Oh, you work with Vue? That's that's the new React killer or whatever." And it's like, I don't know about that, but it's definitely picking up a lot of steam now, especially this past 6 months or a year or so. It really picked up, and I'm just great to be involved in it.
Yeah, sure. So for everyone out there that doesn't know what Vue is, then what is Vue.js? So
Vue is a modern, they call it the progressive JavaScript framework. And I guess what that would mean is it's very lightweight. It's non-opinionated. The core library, I think, is only 20 kilobytes minified and everything. But yeah, Vue's just like an amazing way to write any kind of web apps. You can do, traditional single page applications, progressive web apps, all that kind of stuff. But one of my favorite things about it is just the ecosystem around it and how easy it is to get involved and how welcoming the community is.
Yeah, it's quite impressive that it's so small, because some of the other frameworks that are out there, they're getting very, very big, and especially with the likes of NPM and stuff out there now that's linking to every other library that's out there, the JavaScript ecosystem is becoming bloatware, I think, is probably the best term to use.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you there's this tool, I forget the tool, I'll try to find it, but it was a visualizer of your NPM dependency tree, and you could run it on your GitHub repository, and it's kind of absurd how many levels deep that dependency tree goes, but we just npm install any package, and that's how it goes, I guess.
Sure. So apart from it being a really small file, why should I or why should the listeners want to use Vue?
So I would say the top reason, if you're just getting started in this area or trying to decide like what framework you kind of want to like dive into, Vue, in my opinion, is the easiest to get involved with. I've done work in React and Angular, and Vue just kind of it clicked for me faster. I kind of understood the syntax, but it also is a very, very powerful tool. I haven't really ran into anything where Vue couldn't get me where I wanted to go.
Okay, so is it an opinionated framework? So one of the sort of the drawbacks to a lot of these out there, especially the likes of Angular, is that you have to do it their way. You don't have much say in how you use the framework. Is Vue very opinionated like that, or can you sort of mold it to your own way of working?
No, it is not opinionated, and that's one of my favorite parts about the framework. You can get up and running with it by just dropping it in a script tag in a regular HTML page. You don't even have to have, the Webpack build process, all that. And the Vue core library is very small, like I said, but it also only does a very specific set of things. It manages your views for you. And there's packages built around this, including Vue Router for doing application routing and like a single page application. And then there's VueJs, which is a global storage state management system. So you can take the core Vue package and you don't have to use Vue Router or Vuex. You can use whatever you want. It's very pluggable, and they kind of built the ecosystem around being able to plug in whatever you want. So they don't really require you to do things a certain way or use some certain software, certain paradigm. You can do whatever you want.
Okay, cool. So the thing that people like to do, because as I've said, there's a lot of JavaScript frameworks out there, and people will argue that framework isn't quite the right word to apply to all of them, but it's a JavaScript library that helps you do something, and you stand on the top of it. So to me, that's a framework by any other name. So what people like to do is compare it to everything out there. Like we've already mentioned, React and Angular, maybe Knockout.js. What makes Vue stand apart from those? Is it even comparable?
Yeah, so we can start with React because that's the biggest one. That's the most common one. In terms like Vue versus React, it's a huge debate online. You'll find people on either sides of the flame war, as you want to call it. I'm more of the opinion you should be using what you want and whatever makes you more productive as a developer. But Vue and React have a lot in common. The performance is pretty much the same across the board. There's certain tests where React will come out ahead, and there's certain tests where Vue will come out ahead in specific use cases. But in terms of React needs to be built for you to run it. Whereas I said, like Vue, you can kind of just throw it in a script tag on an HTML page, get going with it. And the other really cool thing about Vue is you can add it to an existing project like pretty easily. If you have an older kind of jQuery or some kind of project, you can just stick it in there, and we can get into that. But yeah, you can designate like kind of the Vue part of the app and just have that take over that whole part of the application. So I'd say, yeah, it's a lot easier to get going with, like I said, to pick up with, and there's a lot of different methods that you can use to utilize the framework. Sure.
So you mentioned use cases there, and when people have tried to explain it to me in the past, they've said that you would use Vue for a certain thing, a certain use case, and if you were doing a bigger application, you might use React or Angular, but you would only use Vue for showing data. You wouldn't necessarily use it for some sort of big CRM type system you were building. Is that the case? Is there any sort of main or specific use cases that you'd say that Vue was really good for?
Actually, no. Like, there's not any specific use case, it kind of fits into everything. Like I said, so tying back to what you said about how it should only be used for small Vue data layer things is that's the core library, like I said, the Vue library. But if you start including things like the Vue router and Vuex, and then you have a full single page application framework, like as powerful as Angular, only it's not MVC, just as powerful as React. But Vue can also do things. You can do progressive web apps with it, which that seems to be the new hotness everyone's talking about. There's something called Electron Vue, which Electron is node-based desktop applications. So you can write a desktop application in Vue. There's a few differences there and a lot of gotchas, but it's pretty cool. Yeah, there's also, I haven't used this yet, but I really need to dive into it. Something called NativeScript Vue. NativeScript is a technology to transpile JavaScript web applications into native mobile components. So you can use Vue to write a mobile app in that sense.
Oh, nice. And I guess that is, I think it's Cordova, isn't it? That you can write mobile applications in JavaScript. I guess that's along with similar lines as that sort of thing. Yeah,
it does kind of the same stuff, but you get to use the same Vue syntax that you use on your desktop app in your mobile app.
Cool. Okay. So we've already sort of touched on the fact that it's not overly opinionated on what you can and can't use it with. A few people might cringe at this next question, but can you use it with Bootstrap?
So that's kind of funny because when I first started using Vue, it was in enterprise, Bootstrap web application, purely MVC backend and everything. So we started adding Vue, and at first we used it in like one place on the Bootstrap page, and it will agree with it pretty well. The only issue you'll run into there is Bootstrap is built upon jQuery.
Yep.
So jQuery is another, like, pretty much a framework. So having both of those in your code not only leads to like more bloat, since you don't really need both those libraries present, but it can also complicate things because they do things in very different ways. So someone made this library called Bootstrap Vue. And what they did is they remade all the Bootstrap 4 components within Vue. So you can include this in your Vue project. You can use your same Bootstrap syntax you're used to, doing your rows and columns, all your components. And but it's all native to Vue, and you don't need JavaScript as a dependency anymore. Or jQuery.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that sort of blows one of my questions out the water a little bit, which is, can I use it with the likes of jQuery? And I guess the answer is hell no.
So, yeah, the technical answer to that is yes, you can use it with the likes of jQuery. But I think it's important to understand that you shouldn't and why you shouldn't.
Yep.
jQuery is it's a framework that's based upon directly manipulating the DOM. Everything you do will manipulate the DOM in some way directly. You have hidden spans and you just touch things all over the place.
Yep.
Whereas Vue is a very data-driven framework. The HTML elements that appear on the page are usually corresponding to some kind of JavaScript object. So they're all based upon the data, and as the data changes, the HTML will update based on that. Where that becomes an issue is jQuery likes to kind of reach directly into the DOM and just kind of change the HTML in very, very like deep layers. And when that happens, Vue isn't really made aware of those changes because it's not in Vue's tracking system. And what will happen is your Vue application state and your jQuery state, which is the DOM, will get out of sync pretty easily.
Okay. So some of the frameworks like React have a shadow DOM, or I think it gets called other things in other tech. But does Vue then have its own version of the shadow DOM, or is it something different to that?
Yeah, so Vue does use, they call it, I think it's virtual DOM. But yeah, it's essentially the same thing. Instead of HTML nodes, Vue has V nodes, and it just provides a very like deep level access into the HTML code, or in this case, the Vue code.
Yep.
And how Vue works at a very high level is any changes that happen within the Vue framework will update the virtual DOM tree. And then Vue will go in, compare the virtual DOM tree to the actual DOM tree, and only update what is required. And that is one of the reasons Vue is like so fast as a framework, is because it's really smart at figuring out how to update only exactly what changed and leave everything else the same.
Okay. You mentioned when I was asking about Bootstrap, MVC. Now, does that mean that we can use Vue.js with MVC from Microsoft, the .NET MVC?
Yeah, you definitely can. So that application I mentioned, enterprise application, it was built in .NET Framework 4.5, I think, which is still an MVC .NET framework. And you have to change a few things. So there's a little bit of extra boilerplate, I'd say. But there's very common tutorials out there for how to set up Webpack and all that. But essentially what you do is you have your main like index.html page that the MVC renders to. And in that, you just tell it to include the Vue library. And then from there, you can just write your regular like Vue templates inside that HTML file, or I think MVC uses Razor, is it?
Yep.
Yeah, so you would just write your Vue stuff in that Razor file. And then you can set up Webpack to still compile everything down. And then you'll get everything into one JS bundle file. That's a Webpack thing. It takes all your dependencies and spits it out into one, usually bundle.js. And you just take that file and include it on your page, and then you kind of just have Vue there.
Sure. So I guess it's something that if you have an MVC application at the moment, you could retrofit Vue into it.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. That's exactly what I did. And it's really a cool process because there's lots of resources out there. There's lots of people that were in the same boat, because it's a new framework. They didn't plan for it. And a lot of people have these MVC applications and just wanted to add Vue to it. So you can get a lot of help, I guess is what I'm saying. There's a lot of resources out there. And I don't think we ever hit any issues to where it was like, oh, because we're using MVC, we can't do this one thing. It was always just, we might have to do it a slightly different way.
Sure. Because Vue is the cool new JavaScript framework to work with, can we sort of keep up with the cool kids and write our MVC using TypeScript, or do we have to go back to vanilla JavaScript?
You can use what you want. So Vue actually has official TypeScript support, which is really, really cool. When I started using it, we were actually using TypeScript, and Vue had support for it, but it wasn't the best at that point. This was over a year ago, but now the TypeScript support is amazing. They have an official, we could talk about the CLI in a bit, but they provide a way to just scaffold out a Vue project that already has TypeScript support enabled. You don't have to do anything. It's just there. It has, a basic TS config file with regular default values. You can tweak all those if you want. But it's pretty easy to get up and running with Vue and TypeScript. And the developers are, the developers, like, they know the benefits of TypeScript. So you have that first party support, which I think is very important, whereas some frameworks might not have that first party support and interest.
Sure. So if you have a question or a query or a problem, are the Vue guys there in the community to actually reach out to and talk to the developers themselves?
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite things about Vue is not only the contributors, but the documentation is amazing. And I remember I had a bug with the Vue CLI tool where something weird was happening, and it was always trying to download NPM packages from some other mirror that was really far away from me, a server. So I went on, I couldn't figure it out. So I went on GitHub, I made an issue, And Evan Yu responds to it in a couple hours, the creator of Vue.
Right.
And he's like, he identified the issue. I forget exactly what it was, but pretty much he said, I'll get that taken care of. Like, here's a workaround for it, and this should like work in the meantime.
No.
And I was just absolutely amazed for that. That was kind of my first interaction with a core team of some software that's that big.
Yeah.
And yeah, the community is absolutely amazing. There's the VueJS forums where people are always ready to help you. There's an official Discord channel. The documentation itself is amazing. There's lots of resources.
Cool. So there's a lot of documentation out there. And I remember when I was using AngularJS, which is very different from the Angular that we know today. And I think one of the first things that blew me away with AngularJS, some might say the only thing that blew me away by AngularJS, is when there was an error, the error was really quite succinct. It told you what was wrong, what the actual problem probably was, probably how to fix it, and it even gave you a link to a knowledge base that you would click and it go, here's your problem, this is why it happened, and that was always good. Is there that sort of level of support and documentation for Vue as well?
Yeah, there's definitely. So I don't know if Vue provides knowledge base links in their error messages, but their error messages are always very straight and to the point. I shouldn't say always. There is, of course, edge cases. You break something you shouldn't have touched, and you get some weird error. But the majority of the time, it will point you in the right direction. It will just kind of tell you, hey, this property might be defined wrong, or you're calling a function that doesn't exist, something like that. And I think like 9 times out of 10, I just Google their message, and there's someone that already experienced it, and the answer is right there on the official Vue, GitHub or forums or something.
Yeah, that's good, because working with JavaScript, a lot of the time when errors happen, I think we've probably all experienced at some point, is that the error consoles that we get in our browsers will blatantly lie to us, because we'll look at it and it'll say, oh yeah, there was an error on line 423 in website.js, and you go and have a look, and website.js is only 15 lines long, and you can't find out exactly what it is, and then when you track it down, it wasn't even in that file, it was somewhere else, and that always drives me up the wall with JavaScript debugging. Yeah,
nobody likes being 10 files deep in some JavaScript debugger and just you're in all kinds of libraries. No, it's not like that. They're usually straight and to the point, and if they do give you a line number, I've always had it spot on.
Yeah, sure. So I think we mentioned Webpack, we've mentioned NPM. How and where do you get Vue to get started with it?
Yeah, so it would depend on the kind of application you're doing, but if you're just spinning up a new application, you just want to get started with Vue, I'd say the best way is to install the Vue CLI tool, just a simple npm package, and then you get a global package available from your terminal. You can use the command Vue UI, which this is new in the new CLI. And what this will do is it will launch a browser window, like a visual website, to where you can build or scaffold out your application from here. So it goes through, it has you, give your application name and all that, and then it will ask you what kind of application you want. Do you want a single page application? Do you want progressive web app support? Do you want TypeScript support, which we mentioned? It'll kind of walk you through all these things. You can add unit testing right from there. You can add other plugins like GraphQL, Apollo, design frameworks, all this stuff. And you can do all this from a visual tool. And of course, they have the same tool available in the command line option. But I'd say that's the easiest way. That's the most fun way, I'd say, to get started with it. But you can also just throw it in a script tag on the HTML page if you're using an existing application.
All right, so you can just you can reference it from a CDN or something and just start hacking away with it.
Yeah, that's what's really cool. And I know there's websites like Code Sandbox where you can go on and it'll spin you up a little fiddle with Vue app already set up. and you can just start using it right from there without installing anything.
Okay, cool. That's the web page that it spins up, and the wizard that it gives you and walks you through sounds really, really good. Because for people that aren't used to using CLIs, that they're used to or they like to use the graphical interfaces, I think that's really nice, and it takes away some of that that required knowledge, I guess, to know which command to run next to get to the next point in just building out an empty project.
Yeah, that's what's so cool about it. I really got to give props to the Vue team for making that tool. It kind of blew my mind when I saw it. I was so obsessed with it. It was still in beta, and I just started using it, and I wrote a whole article on it and did all this research on it. And the UI is like such an amazing tool. And I feel like you said, for a lot of developers that aren't quite as comfortable in the command line yet, maybe, it puts you on the same playing field as everyone else. And it helps you learn because you can learn in a visual way.
Yeah. So we've sort of fanboyed about how good Vue is. What are some of the downsides? Are there any downsides to using Vue?
There's no downsides at all. No, I'm just kidding. So I'd say a lot of the downsides are going to be the same as all these other frameworks. You're using a JavaScript framework, which means you have to run JavaScript on the page, right? So if you are, I guess some organizations might block JavaScript or not allow like certain sources. So that could be an issue, but I think this day and age, that's becoming less and less of a thing. And then the other big one I'd say was Vue supports all the way back to IE9. Yeah. But if you need to support something earlier than Internet Explorer 9, that will probably be a deal breaker for you.
Sure. So something I've had a bit of a conversation with a few people lately around JavaScript frameworks is SEO. Now, the reason for my sort of interest in this side of it is that I currently use Umbraco or Umbraco, however you want to pronounce it, to run the podcast website, and I've actually built out an API version of Umbraco. It's in very early stages at the moment. You can have a look at it on GitHub. And what I wanted to do was build an API version of my website so that I could use a JavaScript framework to build the front end technology, the front end website. Whether that was Vue, whether it was React, whether it was Preact or something else, I was undecided, and I was speaking to some SEO experts, shall we say, and they said that using a JavaScript framework such as Vue would cause issues for SEO because the data isn't pulled out and on the page straight away. Do you know of any sort of ill effects like that from Vue, or is that just a lack of knowledge on that person's part?
I wouldn't say it's a lack of knowledge on that part. So this is also like kind of a debated issue. Some people will totally say it's, if you use a JavaScript framework, you don't get SEO. Although a lot of people will say there's ways to get around it. You can kind of do things to make the crawlers better search your site. And Google's crawler, in their official statement, it says that they do crawl JavaScript. A lot of people see that and say they do, but they don't, type of thing, because we don't know what their timeouts are set as. If your page loads a little bit slower, will it just drop it? So there are those drawbacks to all these web frameworks, but like I said, there's ways around it. So two of the most common solutions are pre-rendering and server-side rendering.
Okay.
Pre-rendering, I would say pre-rendering won't really get you too much with Vue because you can only pre-render so much. The whole point of having a dynamic framework like this is it's based on user input, right?
Yep.
So you can pre-render, I guess, what you think is going to be immediately showed, but you can't go through everything and click through everything that way. Server-side rendering, what that does is there's this very popular framework called Next.js in the React community. And someone ported it over to Vue. It's called Nux.js.
Sure.
And it's kind of a whole little bit different way of making a Vue application, but what it will do is it will render your Vue components on the server side and only spit out like the full rendered HTML and JavaScript. So that rendering doesn't happen on the client side anymore, which means the crawler essentially sees your site as a normal old school web page.
Okay.
And there's a few drawbacks to that because using Nuxt requires you to do things a little bit more the Nuxt way. So it kind of locks you into a little bit more opinionated framework, but it's not overboard. It's not too crazy.
Yeah. My reason for sort of looking into it is that I've been asked a couple of times to produce a podcast application. I've also had the idea of porting the site over so it was a progressive web app as well. And I quite fancied Vue as maybe the solution. And I hadn't really thought about the SEO side of it. And we were just in an SEO meeting at one place that I've worked, and it came up in conversation, and it just it sent shivers down my spine of have I made the right decision going this way? So it's always the forefront of my mind when I sit down to do it. And it's been that much of a stumbling point for me. I haven't started to do it. I've built the API. The API works. It's fine. But I haven't actually built the front end yet.
So I will say this might be a game changer for you if you haven't heard of it. But it's still in development. It's in beta. But there's something called VuePress, which is, I'm on their site right now. It says Vue-powered static site generator. So this is actually maintained by the core Vue team. They're working on this. And I think the Vue documentation, don't quote me, but I think the Vue documentation is generated with this now.
Okay.
And the roadmap, the eventual plans kind of say eventually will kind of be a full-featured CRM, have all that headless CRM support, like or CMS support, like something like WordPress. But right now you can generate. They say like it's really good for like documentation sites or anything that uses Markdown. So blogs are really good. I imagine a podcast website uses like some kind of Markdown template or something like that. And it's just a really cool thing because it outputs just the static HTML files. You don't have any kind of dynamic JavaScript loading. It's just pre-rendered static HTML, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know another guys over at MS Dev Show. Their website is it's a baked website, static site, and I've had Jonathan Bullock on the show a couple of times, and he makes JBake, which is a Java static website builder. So you write all your Markdown files, and it goes and builds it with whichever template engine that you've picked. And I've used that to produce a website called andinoakara.com, which is a genus of tropical cichlid fish. So that's all baked. So I do quite like the idea of that, but what I liked about Umbraco is that I could schedule everything. So like I'm going to be out of the country for a couple of weeks, so it means that there's going to be I think it worked out about 3 Mondays due to other things I'm doing where I'm not going to be available to get stuff ready before the sort of like the day before release day of an episode, which is what I tend to do. So I'm going to have to schedule 3 weeks worth of content prior to that, and I can just leave it and have full confidence that at 9 a.m. GMT or BST that web page will go live when the episode drops from Libsyn, and it's that sort of stuff that I like and I need, and also the redirecting stuff that I get from the MVC side of the system, where I show my RSS feed and I redirect off to affiliate links and stuff like that. But I can put those behind nice to remember, easy, short URLs for people.
Yeah, that's a really big plus. Yeah, definitely. I would say follow that project, and if they end up adding the features you need, maybe you can dive into it.
Yeah.
I know one of the big things was you can have it build off a GitHub repo. Like you can push Markdown files to a GitHub repo and then have those pages be statically generated. So I wouldn't have the scheduling part, but I thought that was really cool that you can just kind of push to a repo, your website gets updated, and it's magic.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds good. I will check that out. So talking about things to go and check out, where should the listeners go to find out more about Vue.js?
So I'd say the first thing would be the official Vue docs are absolutely amazing. So that site is vuejs.org. I'm sure you'll throw all these in the show notes or something.
Yep.
But that's the main thing if you kind of want to like just dive into the framework, kind of see a little bit about how it works, play with it a little bit. Their documentation is cool because you can open up the Chrome DevTools on the page and start editing things from the console. Like they walk you through a process. And you can kind of see things change live as you're like typing it into the Chrome console, which is really cool. And I'd say more on if you just want to kind of learn about Vue, that kind of stuff. There's an amazing podcast, which if you're listening to this, we know you like podcasts. It's called Views on Vue, and that's hosted by devchat.tv, and that is that's kind of between 30-minute, hour-long podcast. They pick some topic, usually have someone on from the community that's working with Vue and talk about a subject. And that is run by the Vue core team, which is really cool. There's a few rotating members that are on there. There's also the Vue newsletter, the official newsletter, which they have an email newsletter and a 5-minute weekly podcast. So that's really cool. And if you have that on 1.5 speed, that goes down to 3 minutes, and there's no excuse not to listen to it.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's really cool, just kind of knowing like what's going on in the community and the ecosystem. If there's a new thing that just came out, like I think I mentioned Nux.js earlier, and they just launched their version 2, which is a really big release for them. And I heard about that from the official Vue newsletter.
Sure.
But then I'd say there's the official there's a Discord channel for Vue if you use Discord, and you can kind of get support there, just bounce ideas off of people. But also one of the sites that I think is really cool is someone made a Vue jobs website where they just compile listings from job applications that are looking for Vue developers. So if you you pick up Vue and you decide you want to like work with this and find a job where you can do this every day, that's a really good resource.
Yeah, I'm seeing that coming up on the job boards and that quite a lot at the moment, because I am a contract developer now, and Vue seems to be the hot framework that everyone's after. So if you've got .NET Core experience and Vue.js experience, then there's some good amounts of work coming up at the moment for you.
That's pretty cool. Where have you been seeing those at?
Obviously, I'm only looking in the UK because I'm commuting to my jobs, and commuting over the pond might be a little bit of a trek every day. But definitely in the UK, I'm seeing quite a few adverts starting to pop up now with Vue. It's not quite yet at the same levels as the likes of React and Angular. There's still a lot of demand for those, but they have been the big players in the scene for a lot longer than Vue has, really. So it's only to be expected.
That's pretty cool, because that kind of ties into something that I noticed was so the creator of Vue, Evan Yu, he actually worked at Google working with Angular before he made Vue.
Right.
And so that's why a lot of people will see a little bit of original Angular syntax in Vue, but his nationality is Chinese, and I know he has a lot of connections to the industry over there, and you can tell that a lot of the core companies using Vue, I think AliExpress or Alibaba uses Vue, and so what I noticed, the last time I checked the actual stats versus like React versus Vue versus Angular, React has a much larger share in the United States where I am at, but Vue has a much larger. They had a larger share, like or not a larger share than React, but a lot less of a gap when you look at the worldwide market. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and you kind of confirmed that in a way. And it seems that a lot of like outside the United States, a lot of places are using Vue and picking up Vue and just totally running with it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this disrupts the market, really, because I'm a .NET dev by day, really, and full stack .NET developers have for a long while sort of been the top earners for the sort of web stuff, but over the last sort of 2 years or so, I've been noticing that React developers, which pretty much makes you a front-end developer, has been coming with salary tags on them a lot higher than just a C# developer, which has always been interesting. So it'll be interesting to see how Vue affects that. Will it level the playing field? Will it become the next big demand that everybody really wants and wants to pay silly money for? I don't know, but it's always good to see. But I think the JavaScript landscape changes so rapidly that Vue is the hotness now. By the time this goes out in a week or so, it could be something else. We could be completely wrong. So we'll just have to play it by ear.
Yeah, that's almost too true. You know, it seems like even since I've been involved with Vue, there's people were just. I remember when I first starting, people were saying Angular's dying, Angular's dead, and I think that's right before Angular 5 released. And then Angular 5 came out, and I guess they changed some things. I don't know too much about it, and people seem to be like, oh, okay, well, Angular's okay now. And it's just like, really, like, you freak out over this one little thing. I find that funny in the framework community.
Yeah, we've had it in the .NET community for many years. Every time there's a new version of the .NET framework that's released, a few months before, there's always the rumor mill that VB.NET is done. It's over. They're killing it. The new version comes out, and it's still goddamn there. I shouldn't hate on it too much. I started as a VB6 developer and did VB.NET, and then grew up a little bit and became a C# dev. But it happens all over the place. People have opinions about what should and shouldn't be done, and how does the saying go? Opinions are like arseholes. Everyone's got one, but a lot of them stink.
Yep. I think that also it kind of ties into, though, like you talked about the changing landscape, and I think things are kind of moving away from this total just MVC framework kind of application, but moving to where you do a little bit more of your logic on the client side. And that's where I kind of see things moving. Is a lot of job applications I've seen are looking for like React or Vue, something like that, but then they're looking for for the API side, a smaller kind of framework like .NET Core or Node.js, Express, something like that. And that's where I think is really interesting, because I've dabbled with .NET Core a little bit in personal applications, and I use .NET Framework 4 in enterprise setting, and I really, really love .NET Core as an API tool. Yeah. And I think it's a good tool to pair with Vue. A lot of people will say you have to use Node.js, use the same language. That's just not true. You can use whatever you want for your API. Do what you're comfortable with, and I really like the C# and .NET Core. Yeah,
and I'm giving going to give away a little bit of the magic here that I'm actually day to day at the moment, as of recording this, working in .NET Core for the API side of the system, and all the UIs are written in MVC, but with Vue.
Okay.
So they do go together quite well, and I know that there are plans currently to look at moving away from MVC on the front end and making them purely Vue. But I do agree that writing APIs in core is very, very nice. It is good, and for anybody further interested in .NET Core, they should go and check out Jamie Taylor's podcast. He's been on here twice now, and he's just started the .NET Core podcast. I'll include a link to his show in the show notes as well. But he's talking about some very interesting stuff over there, and .NET Core is good, and it's very nice and quick and lightweight, and I think it hands itself very very well to Vue.
I can plus on that podcast too. I'm actually in a Slack channel with Jamie, and I think he posted that, and I listened to it, and yeah, it was really helpful, and just a great podcast if you're interested in anything .NET Core, which I think the .NET Core community recently launched version 2.0 or 2 point something.
2.1.
Yeah, 2.1. And I messed with that, and then I messed with 2.0 right when it launched. And just the improvement just from the 2.0 to 2.1 releases, which was not that long of a period of time, were kind of amazing to me. That team is really, really just working their butts off. And I love the fact that it's open source also. I feel like that needs to be mentioned more.
Yeah.
Microsoft really turned things around.
Yeah. I love the fact that it's cross-platform. Pretty much truly cross-platform until we get to version 3, and I believe that they're doing something. They're adding stuff to it that will, depending on what you're trying to do, will make it not cross-platform anymore with support for WPF applications. You'll be able to do .NET Core WPF applications, but they will be only available on Windows. So that. For me, that sort of goes against the whole ethos of .NET Core, but who am I to argue with them?
Yeah, no, it kind of seems like a backward compatibility thing, so I guess it's not the end of the world. But yeah, it's with something with Windows platform in its name, you can't exactly expect it to be cross-platform. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I think we're digressing slightly from the topic that we were here to discuss. So I think that's a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to end it on. So thank you again for coming on and talking to us about Vue.js.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was amazing to be on here, and yeah. Yeah,
well, you never know. In a few months' time, we might have you on telling and talking to us about how Vue.js took over the world, and React and Angular are completely dead now, and you can only use Vue.js because it's all Chrome supports. But or you could be talking to us about the next big JavaScript framework. So thank you for coming on, and thank you to everyone out there for listening. You've been listening to The Cynical Developer. I'm James Sluddart, and you've been listening to Brandon Lyons talking about Vue.js. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website where you can find all the resource links, show notes for each episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, and help The Cynical Developer to reach more developers around the globe.